In the history of the post-apocalypse, few symbols are as recognizable as the winged sword and gears of the Brotherhood of Steel. To the people of the capital wasteland, they were knights who brought water. To the people of the Commonwealth, they were steel rain that broke the Institute. But the Brotherhood we encounter in the year 2296, patrolling the radioactive dust of the California wastes, they are a radical departure from everything we've known. They are grimmer, they're more religious, and they feel more ancient than they used to. While viewers and players alike have long debated the militaristic shift of the Brotherhood under Arthur Maxon, the West Coast chapter, seen in the recent television series, presents a different kind of evolution. It isn't just a change of leadership, it's a change of its DNA. Today, we're going to explore something that bridges the gap between the Mojave wasteland and the California hills, so to speak. An idea on how the Brotherhood of Steel of the West Coast survived its slow death. Under Elder McNamara, the Mojave chapter was a ghost of itself. Locked inside Hidden Valley, their bunker, they were a textbook case of closed systems, heading toward entropy. In Fallout New Vegas, we learned the Brotherhood was literally breeding itself out of existence. Their refusal to recruit outsiders, combined with their catastrophic losses against the NCR at Helios 1, meant the population was in a tailspin. If we look at what a lot of people say is the canonical path of the Courier facilitates a truce between the NCR and the Brotherhood, and helps Veronica Santiago try to modernize the chapter. We see a Brotherhood that finally realizes it must change or die. They needed fresh blood. But in a wasteland as brutal as the Mojave, where do you find a massive pool of disciplined, combat-ready recruits who already understand the value of a rigid hierarchy? And the answer may lay across the Colorado River. When Caesar fell, whether by tumor or Courier's blade, we do know he ended up in a field laying, and the Legion was broken at the Second Battle of Hoover Dam, thousands of legionnaires didn't just vanish, but many of them were a people without a home at this point. After all, the Legion was built on the destruction of tribal identities. A former Decanus couldn't simply go back to a tribe that no longer existed. Many of these men were refugees of a fallen empire. They were conditioned from birth to follow a god king, to value discipline above all else, and to view the world through the lens of the strong and the weak. For the Brotherhood of Steel, these Legion remnants were the perfect solution to their population crisis. Unlike wastelanders or profligates, who valued individual freedoms, a former legionnaire was already a finished product. They were soldiers who knew how to take orders, how to live in squalor, and how to die for a cause. After 2281, the Brotherhood must have opened its doors to these disciplined refugees. And in doing so, they invited in a Trojan horse into their own culture. The most immediate evidence of this synthesis is visual. For over 2 centuries, the Brotherhood's aesthetic, for the most part, was defined by steel gray, tactical black, and deep navy blues. And yet, in the TV series, Brotherhood's encampments and air bases have dull reds and golds on their flags and some of their motif. While some historians point out the Brotherhood in Fallout 2 utilized red and gold banners, the specific application here is hauntingly reminiscent of Caesar's Legion. The use of red as a primary color isn't just a stylistic choice for them, it's a psychological one. Furthermore, look at the nomenclature. In every previous iteration of the franchise, Brotherhood groups were referred to as chapters. This is a monastic term, fitting of the Techno-Knights we know and love. However, in the show, Elder, Cleric, Quintus, and Thaddeus, I do believe, specifically refer to their group as a legion. To quote the show, first season, each knight in this legion will search a section of the wilds. Now, they could very well simply be referring to a group of soldiers, like an actual legion, like the legion gets its name from. But I find this interesting, because chapters have never been referred to as such before in lore. This isn't a writing oversight, It's a linguistic fossil, a remnant of the recruits' former lives that has worked its way up into the official terminology of the Order at this point, at least this chapter. In Caesar's Legion, your tribal name was stripped away from you and replaced with a Latin one. This was done to erase the past and to forge a new future, a new identity within the Legion. And strangely enough, we see this exact phenomenon mirrored in the squires and knights of the Order of the Knights of San Fernando, I think is what their chapter is officially called. Some examples: Maximus, Thaddeus, Titus, Quintus, all Latin and or Roman inspired names. These are not the names of wastelanders born in Shady Sands or the Hub. They're Roman inspired, Latin sounding names. When the Brotherhood absorbed the Legion remnants, they adopted the Legion's practice of naming new recruits. To join this new hybrid Brotherhood, you must leave behind your profligate life and take on a new name of Iron. Even some of the ranks have shifted for the most part. The presence of clerics within the Brotherhood, like Quintus, suggests a fusion of Brotherhood scribes and Legion zealotry. The Brotherhood had a semi-religious edge to it all the time, but the TV show presents it as a full-blown tech cult at this point, complete with branding, ritualistic beatings, and a focus on the will. Also, side note, find it very strange that the leader of this chapter is a high cleric, I think he's referred to as, which is strange because every chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel is supposed to be headed by an elder, and the leader of the entirety of the Brotherhood of Steel is the High Elder, usually descended from Maximus. So I just find it strange that the leader of this chapter, this legion, is referred to as a cleric instead. Perhaps the most compelling piece of evidence is how this specific Brotherhood chapter views technology. Classically, the Brotherhood of Steel are archivists at heart. They wanna find a pre-war toaster, figure out what it does, catalog it, and put it in a locker so no one can hurt themselves with it, right? They're obsessed with the preservation of high-level technology to make sure humanity can't nuke themselves into oblivion with it again. However, Caesar's Legion's view on technology was different. Caesar famously didn't like technology that made men soft, like stim packs or luxury items, but embraced the tech that made them strong, like the autodoc for himself, or high-end weapons for his Praetorians, and Fumentari. I do believe it's episode 2 of the season, we see a telling moment. The Brotherhood comes across a fully functional piece of pre-war tech, specifically a vintage car. Now, if you don't know, in Fallout, cars don't run on gasoline. That was pretty much outlawed during the Resource War and closely guarded and kept. Instead, somehow, they figured out how to use what we actually almost made once upon a time, something referred to as a demon core. Pretty much a miniaturized nuclear reactor that could fit in the engine bay of a car. If you pay attention to what look like the gas stations around Fallout, specifically the Red Rocket gas stations that you can come across, the most famous one is in Fallout 4 that you can make into a base, you'll notice that it's not selling gasoline, but it's selling coolant. It's selling coolant for your nuclear-powered car. That's also why when you shoot cars enough in Fallout, they explode in a little nuclear mushroom cloud, like a mini-nuke. That's why. So instead of preserving this perfect pre-war car with a functioning miniature nuclear reactor in it, they seem to have a sense of disdain for it. Quite frankly, for anything that's not a weapon at this point. It seems like the new Brotherhood doesn't want to save the world's knowledge. They seem to just want to take over what they can, using parts of that old knowledge that could facilitate war. They destroy what they don't want to control. This isn't the mission of Roger Maxon. It's the mission of Edward Sallow, the man who became Caesar. The Brotherhood has always been stern, but they were rarely cruel to their own without cause. In the TV show, the cruelty seems to be the point. When Knight Titus is wounded, he doesn't just reprimand Maximus. He threatens to have him hung by his entrails. This is a specific graphic style of threat that is entirely consistent with Legion punishments, like crucifixion and decimation. The Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout 3, and the older Fallout games, would have maybe, at most, stripped a squire of his rank and busted him all the way down to the lowest rank they could, an initiate, for allowing his knight to be hurt like this. But the Brotherhood of the TV show wants to see him bleed. The branding of Maximus's chest is another legionism, if you will. The Legion used brand marks on their property and on their soldiers. By branding their squires with the gear of the Brotherhood, the organization is signaling that these people are no longer individuals. They are tools of the state. It is a merger of the Brotherhood's order and the Legion's totalitarianism. God, I hate that word. Now this brings us to a terrifying political reality. The Brotherhood of Steel is now a house divided. On the East Coast we have Elder Arthur Maxon. While he is a hardliner and a cult of personality figure, he is still a Maxon. He is of the bloodline of the founder, and he follows the Codex. By the by, he is the man that would be High Elder of the entire Brotherhood of Steel. His chapter, the Commonwealth chapter now, formerly the DC chapter, is now the head chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel. Not the founding chapter, but the head chapter. And on the West Coast we have the Brotherhood Legions. And while they are technically under the command of the East, as seen by an arrival of the airships and orders from the Commonwealth, but the tension is palpable. Cleric Quintus speaks of a new era and a desire to take power back. This West Coast chapter, filled with ex-legionnaires who value strength above decrepit bloodlines, is planning a coup. They don't just want cold fusion. They want to supplant Maxon and his line entirely. To a former legionnaire who watched their god king die, the idea of a leader bloodline, like Maxon, is acceptable only if the leader is strong. But if the West Coast perceives the East Coast as being too civilized and soft, they won't hesitate to go to war. We're looking at a setup for a Brotherhood civil war here. The orthodox Maxon loyalists of the East versus the reformist Legion zealots of the West. Now, who is Cleric Quintus? In the hierarchy of the show, he sits in a position that didn't exist in the games. He isn't an elder, and he isn't a head scribe. So, allow me to explain a little bit of the hierarchy of the Brotherhood of Steel, for a normal chapter, that is. The person in charge is the elder. Then the people below him, or her, are usually 3 individuals. The head scribe, the head knight, and the head paladin. Below them are the senior knights, the senior scribes, and the senior paladins. And then you have the knights, the scribes, and the paladins. And then you have the initiates, or squires, if you will, in some cases, depending on which Brotherhood game you're playing. Not Brotherhood game, Fallout game you're playing. There are no clerics in the old hierarchies of the Brotherhood of Steel. And yet, he is a cleric, and he leads the Brotherhood of Steel. This chapter, at least. This Legion, as he calls it. Now, this role feels like a direct evolution of the Legion's Fumentari, or their high priests. His job is to manage the faith of the troops. He speaks of the Brotherhood's discipline and the need for the ruler to return them to glory. Note how he speaks and interacts with Maximus. He doesn't talk about the preservation of technology as a goal in and of itself. He talks about power, both physically and metaphorically. And this is the core of the Legion Brotherhood synthesis here. The Brotherhood provided the power armor, and the Legion provided the will to power. And Quintus is one of the architects of this new ideology. A man who realized that the Brotherhood's tech was the perfect god for a new, even more disciplined version of the Legion. Now you might ask, if the Brotherhood was recruiting Legionnaires, why didn't the NCR stop them? As I talked about before with the NCR, the Republic was stretched thin between the famine of 2291 and the internal corruption of the Brahmin barons. The NCR lost its grip on the Mojave. When the NCR began to pull back to defend its own borders, it left a power vacuum in the region. And in that vacuum, the Brotherhood and the Legion remnants were forced together, so to speak. They were the 2 losers, if you will, of the Mojave, who realized if they fought each other, they would both die out at this point. So they traded. The Brotherhood gave the Legion deserters, safety, and technology, and the Legion gave the Brotherhood a massive, loyal army. And by the time the NCR realized what was happening, Shady Sands went up in smoke. And this new Legion of the Brotherhood of Steel was one of the only standing armies left in the California wasteland. Maximus, God, his name is fucking annoying to say, himself is a perfect avatar for this theory. He's a survivor of Shady Sands, a displaced person who was taken in by the Brotherhood. But look at his training. He isn't taught science, history, or engineering. He's taught to fight, to endure pain, and to worship power armor. Now, if you don't know much about the hierarchy of the Brotherhood of Steel, there are technically only two separate paths someone can take. The path of the scribe and the path of the knight. The path of the scribe sees you working more as an engineer and a historian, right? Someone brings in a strange piece of tech, you look at it, you poke it, you prod it, you take it apart, you figure out how it works, you catalog what it does, what it might not do, if you can fix it, if you can't fix it. Once all that's cataloged, if it's a super dangerous piece of tech that is unstable, you render it inert, put it on a shelf. If it's something that could be useful to the Brotherhood, you make use of it. If it's just a random odd and end, you put it on a shelf, forget about it. That's what scribes do. Scribes do know how to fight, and scribes do know how to use power armor. Pretty much everyone of senior rank knows how to use power armor in the Brotherhood. And then you have the knights, right? The knights are the ones that go out and get the tech. They're the ones usually seen in the power armor or in the recon suits, which are just power armor without the bits of armor on them. While they have more rigorous training than the scribes do, they still know how to evaluate technology, right? They need to know what they're looking at so they don't accidentally pick up an armed bomb. Yeah. They know how to use the tech, they know how to utilize it, they just don't know how to take it apart and catalog it the way scribes do. And then you have an amalgam of the two branches there, the field scribe. The field scribe is a scribe that is, well, sent out into the field to work alongside knights for items that cannot be brought back to the Brotherhood, be it a vehicle or a large robot or something like that. They're sent out, they're dispatched with the knights to, well, literally do their work as a scribe, but in the field. And then the final branch we have is the paladin. Now, dependent on which hierarchy you are looking at for the Brotherhood of Steel, the paladin can either be an evolution of the knight. As such, you need to become a senior knight before you can then become an initiate paladin, or sometimes scribes and knights are both allowed to become paladins, and dependent on what style, it depends on what type of unique secondary rank you may end up with, like Star Paladin, Guardian, Protector, something like that, right? So every standing member of the Brotherhood of Steel knows how to evaluate technology, full stop. That is what they have always been trained to do. Tangent aside, back to Maximus. His name alone is the most Roman name in the entire series. And if he was a child from Shady Sands, why does he have a Latin name? The answer is simple. The Brotherhood gave it to him. They stripped away his old name and old identity and replaced it with a new name that better fits their new aesthetic. His struggle throughout the show, his wavering loyalty, and his desires for a place to call home is the struggle of a man caught between two worlds. He is a new Californian being forced into a Legion mold, almost. While the TV show hasn't explicitly said, we recruited the Legion, the breadcrumbs are everywhere, and I wouldn't be surprised if in future games or later seasons of the show, we find screens or terminals in the Mojave or the Boneyard detailing like the Thaler McNamara Accords or the integration of the Eastern tribes or something like that. We might even learn that the High Elder on the East Coast is horrified by what the West Coast has become. This would explain why the Brotherhood in the show feels so disconnected from the heroic Brotherhood of Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, because they are different. They're a successor state to Caesar's Legion, wearing the skin of the Knights of the Brotherhood of Steel. I'm going to say one more thing about the East Coast Brotherhood of Steel here. The East Coast Brotherhood of Steel, under Lyons, was literally cut off from the power structure of the West Coast. When Lyons went east, he passed through the pit with the Brotherhood of Steel. During a night there, something referred to as simply the Scourge happened, because the Brotherhood wanted a piece of technology the pit had, So they killed every standing adult there and may have even assimilated few of the orphans into the Brotherhood to replenish their ranks. That's how Asher ended up in the pit. Lyons was disgusted by what he did and what his knights did in the pit, that he decided he wanted to help people of the capital wasteland. After they set up in the Pentagon, the Citadel, and started helping people to a point, they slowly requested more supplies and more help from the chapters of the West Coast, but slowly stopped responding to reports and giving reports to the West Coast. Eventually, the Brotherhood on the West Coast just broke all contact with them entirely. And this is why the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout 3 is referred to as Lyons Brotherhood. That's also why the Brotherhood Outcasts exist, the ones that paint their power armor black and red. They still stick to the old ideals of the original Brotherhood of Steel, get technology away from people that can hurt them, keep them safe from themselves, and that's it. They will deal with people, sure, but they're not out to play hero, right? When Arthur Maxon came into power, he fixed this schism between the Brotherhood Outcasts and Lyons Brotherhood of Steel. In fact, he did it so fucking well, the West Coast Brotherhood loved it. They started regular contact again, and he was fully backed by the West Coast, which is how he was able to mobilize and move to the Commonwealth. Mind you, it also helps that he's technically the prince of the Brotherhood of Steel at this point. Well, by this point, since he's an adult, and in the show, he very well may have been crowned High Elder by this point, the king of the Brotherhood of Steel. But in the end, the Brotherhood of Steel we see in 2296 is a warning. It's a warning that technology without humanistic soul becomes a cult unto itself, and that an empire without a heart becomes a machine. This Roman shadow hanging over the Brotherhood of Steel explains every weird thing about the show's depiction of the Knights. The colors, the names, the brutality, and the terminology all point toward a synthesis of the two most rigid societies we have come across in the wasteland. And as we look toward the future, the question is, who is actually wearing the power armor? Is it a true knight of the Brotherhood of Steel? Or is it a Centaurian or a Fumentari of the high-tech Legion? Because if the two-headed bear of the NCR is actually dead, and the Brotherhood of Steel has become the Legion, then the Wasteland is entering the darkest age we have seen yet. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'd like to thank Eric Hewitt and Big O for sticking around. Thanks, guys. Means a lot. If you want to become a member, too, link is in the description. I should have also fixed the link for the Discord by this point in time. I'll try to put it in a pinned comment. I don't know why it automatically defaults to a link that can expire when you give out links for the Discord. It's really weird that they do it that way. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to head out with this one, but I'll leave you with this here. Ad Victorum, or maybe Awe True to Caesar.